Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DMV Confidential. I'm Kenzie Chase.
And I'm Jenny Gable.
And today we have a brand new story for you. So we actually want to talk to you about something that's a little unique in just sort of how it happened and the person that it happened to. The story we want to talk to you guys about today is about a 52-year-old woman who was an accounting professor and was a victim of financial exploitation just before her murder. So the story we want to talk to you guys about today is about the murder of Sue Ann Marcum.
Yeah, Kenzie, so it was October 25th, 2010, when Montgomery County Police responded to a home in the 6200 block of Massachusetts Avenue in Bethesda for a reported death that had just occurred. And when they got there, that's when they found 52-year-old Sue Ann Marcum, who was an accounting professor at American University. She was dead inside the home at the bottom of a staircase there.
Yes, and she was actually found by a friend who also like an ex-boyfriend as well. Like they used to date, and I guess they usually have a good morning call, and she didn't call, and so he immediately became concerned and then went to go investigate, and he was actually the one, I believe his name is Larry March.
Yes.
He was actually the one to find Sue at the bottom of the basement.
Yeah, so he said that he didn't receive his regular wake-up call. She'd always kind of call him to wake him up to get ready to go to work. And like you said, Kenzie, when he didn't receive that call, he immediately knew that something was wrong. And that's when he found Sue there inside the home.
Yeah, and I'm curious about the timeline about when he actually found, because it says Monday morning of when he noticed something was wrong. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, immediately, it sounded like it was pretty quick that he realized something was unusual. I guess this was like a consistent thing that they did.
Yeah, I guess they just had a close friendship, and it kind of goes to show more about the type of person Sue was, which we'll get into a bit more later as well, to kind of, be on the lookout for her friends in that way. And
right.
Yeah.
So we actually kind of want to start, before we get too much into the details, into the weeds, we kind of want to talk about her and sort of her last memory with one of her family members, because again, this is a real person. And before we get into everything that happened and how this all unfolded, we want you to hear a clip of just her brother talking about his last memory with his sister.
That picture was taken about a month before she died. That was in my parents' backyard near Syracuse, New York. She'd driven up there for the weekend. I was there. I'd come out to visit my folks. Sue came up. She's holding a plate of grilled eggplant from her garden, and she was very proud of that. We grilled that, had that for dinner. We parted company. That's the last I saw of her.
Yeah, you can just see kind of how emotional he is talking about that. He has this good last memory with his sister, this photo of her when they were gathered together as a family.
Yeah. And so after that, well, when investigators actually look into this report, they find what looks to be as if someone, like a robbery, a burglary attempt.
Yeah, so it kind of looked to them like someone had forced entry and kind of ransacked the home, tried to burglarize her home, as you said.
Yeah, the rear
Kenzie.
Window looked like it had been forced open, and the house was, quote, partially ransacked, according to court documents. I don't know what that means. Like, maybe, I guess, just like a few items looked like they were pushed over, or there was some sort of struggle, but not everything.
I think they described it almost as it appeared like the bedroom and just other items throughout the home just looked like they were in disarray.
Yeah.
Like something had taken place there. They found several electronics, though, stacked on the main level of the home.
Yeah, so those weren't stolen, but they later determined that other items of value were stolen. So I think that kind of plays into the burglary aspect of them thinking someone just came in and stole a bunch of things that were valuable and made a quick getaway.
Yeah, they also said that it looked like, with everything being in disarray, that this person that, it appeared that Sue had gotten in a fight with, maybe tried to fight them off from being in the home, that she possibly knew them as well.
Right, so that's what I thought was interesting, that they pretty early on determined that maybe Sue had known whoever did this, because I'm a little confused about how they came to that conclusion so soon. But I guess, there was a forced entry burglary, but for some reason they think she knew this person.
Yeah. They just deemed pretty quickly on that it was, suspicious. It was obvious that someone had taken her life. But as you said, Kenzie, I also thought that was interesting how they were able to kind of decipher that.
Yeah, like how did you know that it was someone that,
right,
like so early on in the investigation? But they end up taking what they usually do, taking DNA evidence. So they took swabbings from the scene. They also, it's very common, they took it from DNA from underneath her nails. Again, they say that she fought back. So oftentimes when you fight back, you might have that person's DNA under your nails. And then they did end up sort of determining, the autopsy report did end up determining that she died through blunt force trauma to the head as well as asphyxiation. So
it appeared that someone had hit her in the head and then strangled her, and that's what ultimately led to her death there. So they were able to determine that. But
right. And so when investigators actually start looking into this, they look at who she had close relationships to.
Yeah, so detectives actually learned that from investigating further that Sue knew someone by the name of Jorge Reda Landeras, and they had met around 2005, 2006. But as their relationship progressed, it seemed to at some points in time be romantic. He was actually her Spanish teacher and her yoga teacher at one point as well. So they had known each other for a few years at this point, but at some point throughout the time that they knew each other, they became jointly involved in an investment fund, which is what kind of sparked something for investigators.
Right, and this is the home that we're pointing out right now. This is the home of where she lived, where Sue had lived, where all this had supposedly happened.
So they noticed that in 2008 she made her first contribution to the fund, but they were both financially involved in this, which is something that, oftentimes in cases like this, investigators will look at some sort of financial motive.
Yeah, so what I thought was interesting about this specifically is that, yes, he was her yoga instructor, her Spanish instructor, and then it became romantic, all of those things that you said. But then, they opened this joint account. She's an accounting professor, but he's the one handling all the finances.
Yeah.
Which I thought, if you're the accounting professor, you would think that she would be the one handling all the financial things. So I don't know if that was just she trusted him with it.
And I thought the same thing, too. And I know that investigators mentioned that, which we'll get into more a little bit later on, but how her friends kind of described her infatuation with him. Like, she seemed very, enamored by him. So to me, I guess it could seem that she just really put a lot of trust in him. But I also thought the same thing. You know, as an accounting professor, she was someone who would help her friends and family with their own taxes and things like that.
Right. So. And Jorge Reda Landeros, I probably butchered that pronunciation, but Jorge was also, he was very financially manipulating her very early on, to the point where Sue kind of had to remortgage her home.
Yeah.
She had to borrow from her retirement funds. There's a big age gap also between the two.
I believe it's about, I might be wrong, but about 14 years.
Yeah, something like that.
But yeah, Kenzie, she was also getting notices from the IRS about owing a lot in taxes and things like that.
Yeah, so she had put her trust in this man, and he was letting her down financially. She was now she was going into debt with all of this.
Yeah, and actually one thing that they did notice specifically, when they found a 1099 form from 2009 in Sue's name, it listed proceeds from the account of over $100 million, which they had a lot of questions about because, again, she was a professor at a university, and that's a substantial amount of money. So, it seemed as if he was in kind of control, but then at one point, she became really concerned about how he was handling the money.
Right, and so it's not like this is obviously very concerning to us listening to this, but it's also concerning to Sue, who is an accounting professor and is seeing how she's getting all these stuff from the IRS, and
the account is being drained.
So she's expressing these concerns to Jorge, and
they actually recovered email exchanges from between the two, where she described not being able to sleep, quote. And she just seemed very troubled about what was happening with the account, and that, she was trying to put trust in him, but was kind of questioning him about what was going on because she's getting all these notices. The account is just essentially being drained, and, they went in on this together. So.
And they also tried to get their relationship supposedly went through like multiple different stages. It first started professional with the yoga and Spanish. Then it kind of evolved into personal romantic, financial. Then it kind of went back to just financial and less romantic.
Yeah.
A little confusing how what the order exactly was, but
they knew each other for quite a number of, at least
I would
4
hope
years.
so. I mean, I would hope so if you're putting all this money in your joint account.
Which actually reminds me of the fact that they mentioned at one point, like looking into this case, that they had both tried to take out reciprocal life insurance policies for $1.5 million
Which is an insane amount.
Yeah, which is a lot. And they were actually, the insurance company denied it because, with that being such a large amount, they deemed that it wasn't necessary for them.
But they were able to take out $500,000.
Yeah.
So $500,000.
And he was actually the
sole beneficiary
on her life insurance policy for $500,000.
So, I mean, it's pretty early on that they're looking into him as the primary suspect. And he is actually, he had crossed the border from Juarez, Mexico, into the U.S. just days before her murder, back in October 21st, 2010.
Yeah, and he actually, they said that he was someone who would kind of regularly travel. He was a dual citizen between Mexico and the United States, so he'd regularly go back and forth. But he did cross just a few days before she was murdered, according to border documents there. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so eventually they were able to sort of get in contact with him, the Montgomery County Police, and he agreed to take a cheek swab, but they said that they just needed it for sort of like an investigation. I don't know how specific they got, but they definitely didn't tell him that he was a suspect in Sue's murder. So he agrees, and then he never crosses the border again.
Yeah, so they, Montgomery County Police, as you said, Kenzie, they coordinated with police in El Paso, and they stopped him as he was crossing, and they asked him, and he agreed to take it.
Yeah,
and
this was in March 2011.
Yeah, and then March 2nd, 2011, and that was the last time that he ever was, had crossed over.
Right, and so little do you know, the DNA comes back that it was found in multiple places around the home.
Yeah, so the DNA actually comes back on April 15th, 2011. That's when police learned that the DNA that was taken from that march from his sample was the source of several unknown male DNA throughout her home, but also on her. It was found on the weapon, which we'll get into more later, that was used to kind of hit her, and the scrapings from underneath her nails as well.
Yes. And so the DNA that was found from around the areas, and also on what they suspect is the murder weapon, which is that liquor bottle. And they were determined that, like, all of this stuff came back to Jorge.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not really looking good for him, right?
Yeah, it came back to, I believe, some drinking glasses that were found at the crime scene, which kind of indicated to them that maybe they were having a drink.
And maybe that's why
before this took place.
Maybe that's why when we talked about why they thought that she knew this person, maybe the drinks were set out in a way that this murder weapon seemed like whoever was here had a drink before they did it. And so maybe that's kind of why they thought that this burglary was from someone that she knew.
Yeah, and again, like the liquor bottle that was used to kind of hit Sue, the DNA was found on that as well, and near some shot glasses that were there. So
yes, but and then they alleged that he stages after the murder stages it to look like a burglary, so it wasn't actually a burglary at all.
Yeah, so they were like, it was, they believe at this point that it was a botched burglary, in a sense that he kind of state that him and Sue had gotten in some sort of confrontation, and at some point he had attacked her there, hit her with the liquor bottle and had strangled her, and then that's when he kind of arranged it to look like someone unknown had broken in the house.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the DNA specifically on her neck, because that part was what they had to do with this was like very unique. Yeah. So they took the DNA from around her neck, which is kind of, I don't even know how that works if there's two different DNAs, but I'm not an investigator. That's above my knowledge, but they kind of took DNA from around her neck that came back to this male, the same male that was like seen around the house and all that stuff. But they were trying to see if it was obviously Jorge's DNA, because Jorge theoretically could just be in the house.
Yeah,
doesn't mean he committed the murder. And so at first, they weren't able to get enough DNA evidence from around her neck to sort of extract DNA from that. So they had to send it off.
Yeah, and they already had his DNA at this point, but like you just said, Kenzie, it wasn't enough from taking it from her neck to match it to his. So they actually transferred it to a different crime lab, and they were able to analyze it further with something that I thought was really interesting called YSTR, which basically they were able to kind of search the DNA with a male person or any paternal member of their family, like brother or father, to kind of see a match using the Y chromosome. There.
Yes, and that's what pointed back to Jorge. So that's a critical piece of evidence because that shows that his hands or his DNA or DNA related to him was around her neck. And we know that part of her death was asphyxiation.
Yeah, and that she didn't know, to police at least any other members of his family that it could have been.
Right. So it should come as no surprise that Jorge is the main suspect, and in fact, he is charged with first-degree murder.
Yeah, so he's charged with first-degree murder, and that's according to court documents dated from April 2011. And they actually learned shortly around that time that he had left the country, and he was in Mexico. They didn't know exactly where he was. As I said, he was a dual citizen. And the last time he had crossed the border was when they had taken his DNA. So at this point, they're trying to find him, bring him back to the U.S.
So they took his DNA, and he gave it willingly, and then just never came back.
Yeah.
So now they're looking for him. But he was charged in 2011, and they're searching for him. And he's in a different country.
Yeah, so obviously police here notified police in Mexico, Mexican authorities, and, over a decade goes by, these papers for him to be brought back to the United States have been filed, but they don't know where he is until actually, and this part, which I thought was very interesting, someone in Mexico, and this is according to the Montgomery County State's attorney, said that somebody was watching kind of sort of a crime show, something like America's Most Wanted, because this case did get some attention, like national attention and things like that, and they actually recognized Jorge as their yoga instructor.
Which must have been mind-boggling. So this case from Montgomery County, Maryland, made its way to the FBI Most Wanted list, and then from that list, some show, maybe America's Most Wanted, some show like that, made its way to Mexico, and someone in Mexico is watching this show and is like, that's my yoga instructor?
I can't even imagine what reaction they must have had watching,
I would have been taking a double, triple take, is that really, because he was under a different name.
Yeah, so police learned he was living there under a different name but still teaching yoga, but I can't even imagine. I feel like I would just feel fear immediately, somebody that's in that close proximity to you.
At this point, he wasn't convicted or anything like that, so at this point you're probably, I would still feel scared.
Yeah.
Someone's accused of this, even if they're not convicted, I would still feel scared, this person's been around me.
They've been wanted for years. Yeah. So it was December 2022 when police in Mexico with the Department of Justice and the Mexico Task Force were actually able to take him into custody. And then it wasn't until actually later, I believe in around July 2023, that he was brought to Montgomery County.
Yeah, so it took a long time.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of a lot. So we know that someone was charged in this case, and then all of this work just to get him back from Mexico to Montgomery County. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine also as the family of Sue here, that somebody's been charged with this and they're looking for them, but they haven't, had the chance to go on trial or any sort of justice be served there. That's something I thought of, can't imagine how they were feeling.
When we talk about Sue herself, Sue, she was a accounting professor at American University. She taught people, there are quotes about people discussing that she taught them the difference between what makes a good teacher and what makes a great teacher. This was someone who was known for her generosity, someone who was known for doing what she loves.
Yeah, I believe she had different awards. She would volunteer and things like that, and her students, they told her brother, who we heard from earlier, that they loved her, and a lot of them went into accounting, became accountants after they took her course and things like that. So she was just a very passionate teacher who seemed to care a lot about her students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think when we're talking about all this, we have someone who's charged, but I don't ever want to forget the person that this was all about. And I think that it's like a main part is that she was an accounting professor. She was well loved. And I think there's some sense of, I think I saw something that was like there was some feelings of embarrassment just because of being financially exploited as an accounting professor. And like how she must have been feeling during that time, even leading up to her murder, just feeling like she was helpless. She trusted this man, and she was still holding out hope that he was the man that she thought he was.
Yeah, and investigators kind of talked about that a bit as well, with the financial exploitation, that things like this people don't realize happen all the time and can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
And that a lot of times people who are kind of, as they called cons in this way, will kind of, target people that might not seem, she was a very strong person, very intelligent. Her family and friends, they told police they had no idea that she was involved in this with him and that he was, exploiting her. So it's something that you wouldn't expect, but it can really happen to anybody.
And I want to play a clip real quick about her brother again talking about her and the kind of person she was.
Sue taught me by understanding how she worked with her students, the difference between a good teacher and a great teacher. And a great teacher cares more about what their students learn than they care about what they're trying to teach. And Sue cared ultimately about what her students learned. Sue taught me.
Yeah, it just goes to show how much she really cared about her students. And I think that he had actually told in a different interview with the Washington Post that she had actually worked as sort of in an office for finance for the circus at one point, and then realized that she wanted to go back to teach at American University where she graduated from. So she was just passionate about teaching people about accounting, and she was someone that was just really loved by her family and friends.
So eventually, I mean, this whole thing goes to trial, and they're obviously fairly recently. It went to trial recently.
I believe about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And during all of this is when prosecutors sort of lay out what they think happened.
Yeah, and they kind of depict this scenario of it seems like they were both sitting down having a drink, maybe discussing, they assumed to be the finances considering the email correspondence going back and forth with her emailing her concerns. But at some point during that time is when he attacked her and kind of used this liquor bottle to kind of hit her in the head and strangle her there before kind of cleaning the scene up to make it look like it was a burglary.
And for the defense's part, the defense team had several questions about some key evidence and why it was never tested. For example, there was a piece of hair that was actually found in Sue's mouth when she was found by investigators. And that DNA was never tested from that. So I think that was a big question for defense was why was that piece of information that seems like it would be extremely helpful, why was that never tested? There was a couple other things that weren't tested that...
I believe like her shirt they had mentioned.
Like her clothing, why wasn't that tested? So the defense really tried to poke holes into like why were certain things tested and why were things not?
They also had mentioned at one point, I believe, that her car was not at the home when she was found and somebody else was found to have been driving it.
Yeah, but that was a little confusing because it wasn't really tied forensically back to Sue.
So police said it had no like forensic connection there. The person wasn't connected, but that was also something that I was just a bit
and I have no idea what that even means. Like, was this car stolen? Was this car like I have no idea what that means. How is someone else just driving her car?
Yeah. So definitely some questions there, but again, prosecutors said that it appeared they had this personal turned financial relationship, and then at some point it just kind of erupted into this taking
and
place.
at one point Jorge had told, I guess, a Washington Post reporter that he didn't come back to the country during that time, and then according to border control, they said no, he definitely border crossing. They said no, he definitely went into the country. Just days before. Yeah,
he had told the reporter that he wasn't in the country when Sue was murdered. And then actually that reporter had to testify in court about that because they were able to find, as you said, Kenzie, that he was in the country at the time. So he had lied to the reporter there.
Right. So then eventually Thursday, October 30th, so extremely recently, Just 8 days after trial, Jorge was found guilty of not first-degree murder, but second-degree murder in the killing of 52-year-old Sue.
Yeah, which we'll actually play a clip about in a few moments, but officials kind of mentioned that there's different reasons they could see why the jury would convict him on second-degree murder and not first-degree murder, being that it has a lot to do with premeditation in the case and whether or not it's something that he premeditated before coming over to the house and things like that.
So second-degree murder means that the jury was convinced that he definitely killed Sue, beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
First-degree murder, they're not entirely convinced that he went there with the intention of killing her, right? I mean, it wasn't premeditated.
Yeah, I believe if it's first degree, then they believe that
it's premeditated. He went there knowing that he was going to kill her.
Yeah, so they were not sure that he necessarily premeditated it. Maybe something was said that in the moment made him do this, but that he definitely did intend to kill her.
Right, and then throughout their investigation, they were sort of able to determine that Jorge gained about $252,000 from his exploitation of Sue, from manipulating her and exploiting her financially.
Yeah, and she lost about $312,000
throughout the whole thing. Correct. Which, again, I don't know why they would try to take out a $1.5 million.
There's a lot of questions.
There's a lot of questions about the finances,
but I guess with the close relationship that they had, and again, none of her friends or family said that they even knew that this was happening and that they were involved financially in this way, and they didn't expect it at all.
Yeah. So we're gonna play a clip briefly about what they had to say about the actual conviction.
I would think that they believed that it was intentional and willful, what he did, that it was his intent to kill her. That's what the law requires. But whether he came there with that plan is a different question. Whether he came here with that plan on that night or was all part of his larger scheme and scam, we don't know. I would think.
Yeah, so it kind of just goes back to, again, the jury, she's talking about the jury and the decision that they made. They don't know if, it was necessarily that he premeditated it or not, but that he definitely did intend to kill Sue.
Right. So that's pretty much all we have time for this episode, but we do know that Jorge does face about 30 years in prison and will be sentenced on February 6th, 2026. That's when he's scheduled, at least.
Yeah. So keep up with us on DCNewsNow.com and here on our show to learn more about cases like this.
Yes. If you want to see how this all ends, stay tuned and we'll see you next time.